just going over the agenda for today, see if anybody's got any additions. But basically, we'll get a brief update from Jennifer on the research going on, and then we've got a great presentation from the Denver Rental Registry. Maybe give a little bit of an update on what the scope of work, talk about if you guys want to meet in December, public comment, task force comment, public comment. So does anybody have any additions or anything to the agenda for today? Great. I'm going to stop sharing that. And we will move to see Jennifer, do you want to talk about kind of where things are, just any brief update?
Sure. Yeah, the note on your agenda it sums it up tidily that we're still waiting on a couple of counties for them to respond to the request. We did get part of El Paso County that was for the 2019 year that Todd was able to get out of Elizabeth and Kate's office. So that was good. We're just then holding on 2015 for right now. And thank you to Lori. She also helped and is fleet. We're getting Arapahoe County. Hopefully will be one of our last ones to get in place. So I don't know if you heard anything other than my little mention there, Lori.
No, I emailed them again and requested the information and got the same response. They're working on it. So I am not sure how much more prodding without some kind of fire I can light. So
which counties are we still waiting for? So that was Arapahoe, then it's radio silence, right, from Pueblo?
Yeah, I did pull their transaction file, which we can essentially backtrack and construct who owned back in the 2019 and 2015 years. So it just takes a little bit of constructing that picture.
Jennifer, what about Douglas? Because they told me no.
Oh, right. I'm doing that for Douglas as well because they have a full sales transfers file that we can construct off of.
Okay. If Arapahoe can't get it to us, can you get their sales file, or is that not an option for Arapahoe?
Let's see here.
The person I'm working with is, I feel like he's good faith telling me we're trying.
Sure. Yeah.
I just am not sure. There's just so much that goes on in the assessor's office right now that I'm just not sure.
We do have a full parcel transfer file that was from when we built the 23 version. So
okay.
Worst case, yeah. Ideally not, just because it just takes a little bit more work on our end to build that, but
sure. I'm supposed to be at a conference with the assessors the first week of December. I've got some health issues that might make that not possible for me to go. Cindy, are you planning on going to a conference that maybe you could have a conversation with? It's Mike from Arapahoe that I'm working with. Okay. I would not suggest asking Frank from Pueblo, though. He's not excited about this.
Okay, so Mike from Arapahoe, I'll be there.
Okay, I really am hoping to be there and we'll be able to have the conversation, but just in case it can't be. Appreciate it.
Anything else from you guys
The gist.
in
So,
terms of updates on anything that the team, the task force should know about?
I mean, once we have everything in place, I think we need to have a set date if we can't get out of the files out of Arapahoe in a timely manner, then we'll just proceed on. I did make a request actually to El Paso to get their transfer file and followed up with them, and they said that they've passed it along to the appropriate person. So I asked if they could give me a timeline on when they can get that file over.
So do you guys want to decide on a time that you want to call a drop dead time? So some of the challenges with this is, right, it's going to bump up against other work. And then two, it really is requiring more work out of Jen and Phyllis.
Yeah, I mean, there's that increment of effort to construct these back in time from the file transfers, but we can't really proceed in earnest on the pictures in 2019 and 2015 as it pertains to the size of the entity, because we rely on processing those entities together to make those matches. So at some point we need to just call it. We can't really wait forever on it.
Did you also want to, I don't know, we had a nice conversation the other day about El Paso and potentially the impact of military. Did you guys find any other research or articles or anything like that?
You're reading my mind. We haven't yet, but I think it's worth having a short conversation about if El Paso's the holdup, that maybe, we make a decision not to wait for them. And the issue we're talking about, everyone, is in military communities, there seems to be a very high prevalence of investor-owned homes, and it makes sense because of the sort of transient and then consistently like sort of financially viable nature of the folks who would rent those homes, right? You have families that have military salaries, so they're very likely to get paid. They're more consistent payers as renters, and by the nature of their lifestyle, they are short-term residents, and so they often don't want to purchase homes. So when we started digging into the data, it didn't really surprise us that the big mega owners were down in El Paso County. And it's very possible then that they're sort of serving a niche in a market that we want to be cognizant of, that they're not necessarily negatively affecting housing supply. It could be, in fact, the other way around. And when we start to do all the correlation work, El Paso is likely to be a significant outlier, which means we would have to treat it differently in the analysis we do, because we don't want to skew findings based upon a county that we have, a significant reason to believe would be an outlier. So we've been noodling on how to sort of keep El Paso in, perhaps as a case study, to show a different role for investor-owned homes. But also not hold the project up if we can't get the previous years, because it's very likely that we would have to sort of carve them out and handle them differently anyway. So I don't know how much time you have for a conversation about that today, but that's what Elizabeth is referring to. We had kind of a side meeting the other day to talk about the status of the data, and this issue came up.
Teo, it looks like maybe you have a question or comment.
Yep, I just wanted to amplify Phyllis's comment there, and I think just something we should be very aware of with regard to El Paso County, which is exactly what Phyllis just said. In addition to that, there's actually an overabundance of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in El Paso County than you would find otherwise because of VA loans. So service members will purchase those as rental properties using VA loans. And so I just want to be very, very cognizant of the fact that there's going to be an overabundance of that. That is service members using the VA loans to purchase rental properties as is allowable for their for that benefit. And so there's a separate kind of group to be noted there, just that I think we should be cognizant of, especially when it comes to thinking about policies that that might adversely affect service members and their investments that they have in those communities.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts from anybody? Already, any other questions? Oh, Keith? Oh, no, he was just
Sorry,
playing with the
no
hand. Any other questions or comments, I guess, from the task force at all regarding kind of status and update of where Phyllis and Jen are? I mean, I still think we need a drop dead. I don't know if you want to use, really December as that. What are people in terms of being able to acquire data? I mean, I think if it goes too much past probably mid-December, then that's going to really potentially put a wrench in things. What are people thinking?
Yeah, I would, off the top of my head, I would say something like, January 15th or something. Basically, I know things do get a little bit busy mid-December through early January, but I think you'll probably have all the answers you're going to have with regard to availability of data. I would say by, I wouldn't say December 31st, but maybe January 15th, just a little bit last push at the beginning of the year. And then I'm guessing you're going to be as far as you're going to be. That's my view. But obviously, Phyllis and Jennifer, if you have different ideas, I welcome those.
Lori, it looks like you've got a comment.
So I'm just, we're talking about capturing that data from those 3 big counties, setting a deadline for that capture, correct? That's what you're looking for.
Yes.
I suspect you're going to have to go off of those data files for El Paso and Douglas. I think if they were going to be able to give you something, that they would have by now. And I guess my thought is, rather than waiting on those, move forward with, the information available to you. If they happen to send something, great. I will keep trying to chat with Mike at Arapahoe and see if I can get him to understand the importance of sending it so that you don't have to do the data file. But I think at least with Douglas and El Paso, that might be the best you get. And I kind of worry about waiting to start processing all that data, since you said it's going to take a while until January, and then find out in January, no, they're still not going to give you anything. So just my thoughts.
Heidi?
We did in 2010 a survey of, so this is back to the military question. I was looking it up to see if I was correct about this while you all were talking. We did a survey of military people who are affiliated with Fort Carson. And so it does talk about where they live. It's old data, but I'll send it on if it might be helpful in case you actually get El Paso. Like you could probably, and I'll look, I can't remember if it's statistically significant. I think it might be, but I'll look back and send it. And then you can just sort of see, well, this gives us some guardrails, maybe. Might be helpful even if it's old.
Great, thank you. Kinsey?
All right, Jennifer, I saw you come off mute. Did you want to respond to Heidi before I?
Oh, no, I was just saying thank you.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry I'm late. I was just thinking, wanting to give a little bit of time for Jennifer and Phyllis and not set an artificial deadline, but also, agree that we don't want to get too hung up if nothing's coming. I was just going to offer, if one of the counties, I'm hearing one of the counties that's not being so helpful with data is Douglas. I don't know if you all have relationships with the folks in the Douglas County Housing Authority. We do, and they're super helpful. I know I'm just trying to think of other avenues into government officials in those counties and trying to ask friends who might be able to reach their peers. Would that be helpful at all?
I don't know. I mean, Jen, I mean, do you know what the constraint has been with Douglas?
No, not in particular. Just the work perhaps it takes them to assemble what we requested. But to the extent that there's an end road that can avoid us having to spend a little bit of time always helps, that we don't have to spend that time to essentially back in a version of the files. That would be more preferable, of course.
I can send you all an email offline.
Super.
I guess
Yeah,
the one
and I
thing,
mean,
go ahead, Elizabeth.
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
The
go
one
ahead.
thing I just want everyone to be aware of too with respect to El Paso is we don't even have the file to do the back construct yet. So, Jen, as
We
Jen
do.
mentioned, from El Paso, I thought you requested it, but they didn't.
Oh, so sorry for El Paso. That's
For El
correct.
Paso,
Sorry.
yeah. So when you're talking timing, if we cut it at January 15th and they don't respond with that, then we are gonna probably have to move ahead without El Paso other than the current year. I just wasn't sure if when we were talking about the back construction, if that was clear, that one we're still requesting.
Yeah, we can go back to 19 because Todd was able to dig up a date stamped file for El Paso in 19, which was at least partial information.
Alrighty. And I guess out to the state legislature. It's funny, we reached out to Senator Henriksen for Pueblo and nothing. And as somebody indicated, maybe it was Lori, my 2 email exchanges with him, he definitely did not sound engaged or excited. And so I think there's always that option, but big picture, I mean, I think we've learned 2 things. One, data is difficult to understand what's going on in housing in general. I mean, a lot of you have housing experience, and data in housing is not easy. So that's one big thing that we've been taken away from all of these. And the other big thing that we need to take into account is that really with this contract with Jen and Phil, we've got to, right now we're already having to go for a contract extension because we've got it through January. We're going to look if we can push it to March, but then also our funding ends in June. So any of the other facilitation writing of any papers, anything like that, really, even though we've got an October deadline, the money runs out in June. So we really need to push it to that June timeframe. So I really appreciate everybody's feedback and thoughts. It sounds like there's kind of a general okay with the waiting until January. I'm still more of the idea of December, but I think you've maybe got what you're going to get in terms of some of the things. And unfortunately, maybe it's not that bad a thing that it's El Paso that's one of the big outliers in terms of information, simply because we might have had to deal with them differently anyway. Cindy?
Yeah, I support Tio's January 15th deadline, just because the assessors are incredibly busy during this time of year, trying to certify and get tax roll ready, and you might not get their attention, just because that, you know, that's the ride we're on, and that sort of starts to wind up by January 10th. So you might get some help, but when you're looking at assessors for data, they may just not have the bandwidth during December.
Good point. Thank you. That's going to be helpful. All right. Any other questions, comments for Jen and Phil?
My question, so that we can kind of bookend this, is having heard the feedback from the group and obviously having given a lot of consideration yourself, what would you guys recommend from us?
Are you asking me or are you asking Jen and Phil?
I'm asking
Jen and Phil?
Jennifer and Phyllis. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Elizabeth. But having heard the feedback, what you guys are right up close to it, so you've kind of heard our thoughts on it. I guess what are your thoughts? And again, I'll throw it to Elizabeth to see if we should make a decision now, or if you feel like you have the guidance that you need.
Well, my gut, and Jen, you can give me the evil eye if you want, is that we should start using those transaction files to back construct for the counties that we have, because I think it's not a high probability we're going to get what we're looking for. So I think we should be proactive. You know, that then leaves El Paso, where we don't have that file yet, and Arapahoe, where we're still hoping that we can get data. Although if we can back construct that and we're doing it for the others, we could do Arapahoe as well. I was going to kind of throw it back to the rest of you, because it's I didn't realize, Elizabeth, that the funding ended in June. And so I was kind of wondering, if we're a month or two behind, how does that then impact the rest of your work with respect to your outreach and the report writing and research that you all have to do to report back to the General Assembly? I suspect if we have all the data, well, Jen, if we don't get data till January 15th, when do we have a, like, how long would it take us to have a data set that then we can start analyzing? Probably by maybe early February.
Yeah, if I can go under a hole into a hole
Yeah.
or rock. I mean, yeah, I mean, I would push that deadline up if there's this meeting. Next 2 weeks, first week in December, is that what you said, Lori? And if we can just at least get a corner and say, all right, can we get it by the middle of December? If that's not like, just get some clarity on what Arapahoe can do. And know that first week in December, then that gives us like a go, no go to be able to be prepared to start processing Arapahoe in addition to the other couple of counties, and then we can proceed on, hopefully even in advance of January 1st in terms of that processing.
And Jennifer, I just reached out to Michael again. So I'm like, hey, circling back around in the meeting, where are you at? He's going to be like, oh, yeah, hang on. Let me see, where am I at on that? So maybe have an answer for you before we conclude our meeting today. I'm not sure.
Thanks. I think the point, like, if we can get some clarity on a commitment on delivering files or not, then at least, if we have to back construct an extra county, like, I'd say we do that versus saying, well, we're going to wait 3 weeks for them to get us the file, right? So just hedging some of that based on if we can just get them to give us a time frame when they're willing to commit to providing the files. And if not, then let's just, in the interest of time, to have us spend a little bit of that time to construct that vintage file.
So a quick question to you guys. So the data that Todd was able to pull for El Paso, would that be helpful for Arapahoe or anybody else you might be missing?
Yeah, I mean, if we could get that same file that he was able to unearth for Arapahoe and for Pueblo, absolutely. I mean, it's already like essentially a stamp of what variables that we need.
Okay.
And Douglas as well, right, Jen?
Yes, and Douglas, sorry, yeah.
So Arapahoe, Pueblo, Douglas. Okay, I'll see
And
if
I
he
guess
can.
El Paso, if I mean, any of those that we're missing that he could.
Yeah, we have,
pull up.
he pulled El Paso.
Oh, he pulled El
That's
Paso.
where
That's
we
the one he
were.
pulled. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, and I checked it, it's a good file, so.
Okay, so I'll work with Todd on getting those. He should be able to, since he was able to get El Paso. It's just, it's an OIT for Office of Information Technology file
When
that they,
I didn't realize they had all the, there have been since files that they pushed out, but they don't have all the attribution in there. So that's great. that
okay.
19, I can just pull those then, it's not a big deal.
So do you want to just connect with Todd to make sure, like,
I'll
what
touch base.
website? Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah. Okay. So I know that we were pushing bookends of what else do you need from us? Or what else do you need from the task force, Jen and Phil? In terms of timing deadlines, we talked about the December 8th meeting. So is it like almost like a communication mid-December to let you know if there's gonna be like a go, no go? Like if people think that there is an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, my gut's telling me that to the extent we can, we should move forward as if we're not going to get anything else.
Yeah.
And, so we'll start trying to do as much as we can do. I guess the only other thing that would be helpful to know from the task force is like it would help, I think it would help me and, whatever, I'll speak for us to better understand what your process is after we finish our work. So we understand, if we, because there might become a point where our delay is more costly than missing a county or missing a certain, and so just better understanding where your work's going for the rest of the process might help us if we get to some other bottlenecks, make some decisions about, do we move forward with less than 100% or what have you. Maybe that's something better discussed next month when we have a better sense of what's still missing. But I guess I'm sensitive to the fact that I don't want our work to hold everything else up and keep you from meeting the deadline at the end just because it's taken so long to get data. We can try and figure out a workaround if that's going to be a problem.
And I'd love to hear from the task force on what you want to be able to make sure you hear before you move forward.
Really, it's the summary of the findings, right? And if we're able to draw conclusions about potential market impact to the corporate home ownership, and then determining where we go from there. If we're paying another consultant to put our thoughts together and write recommendations, or if we're taking that on as a task force, I'm not sure which way that's going to play out.
And I would add to Frankie's thoughts, identification of where there are gaps in the data or where data was difficult to obtain, right? Whether geographically or because of LLCs or just, I think, being able to identify what we don't know, because that could be another area for potential legislative recommendations at the end of the task force.
Anyone else want to add in on, again, just trying to help Phyllis and Jen think about where they are. And I think as a task force, you probably do have to come, next. We'll talk about this after the presentation from Denver, but really, when do you want to meet in December? Who wants to meet in December? But I think that there might be at least a short discussion warranted in December in terms of being able then to move forward for some folks. But what are those critical questions that you want answered? And this is what Phyllis and Jen and I talked about maybe it was last week, that we've got the 23 data, so we know what things look like in 23. The reason for looking at 19 and 15 was to really understand how maybe different timeframes impacted or influenced corporate ownership of housing. And so that's why the time series is being interested in looking at, is how has that changed over time. So I guess be thinking about that in terms of what do you really need answered in order to think about recommendations moving forward. And so what are you willing to do without? I mean, we've got a good set, but then, missing Arapahoe is a bummer. Douglas, El Paso, those kind of tend to be three big ones. But do you really need the time series on them, or is the 23 data going to be sufficient? So anyway, we'll move on from there. Cindy?
Just briefly, Keith reminded me that we have a metro area assessors meeting this Friday. And so I'll bring this up again. I'm not sure Arapahoe will be in attendance, but Douglas will be. And so we can bring it up to Toby and see what's up, if he can get the data. And then I believe that El Paso and maybe Pueblo are going through software conversions right now, and that may be your holdup. They may be in transition with their data. So just an FYI, something we could certainly in early December in our statewide conference, we could ascertain for you, and that may be a barrier.
Just one more thing to remember, for the metro counties, we have 21 also, because we already had it in hand. So we won't have El Paso and Pueblo for 21, but we do have the metro counties. So we can look at whether this is becoming more or less prevalent from sort of the height of COVID. Is it continuing or is it waning? And, again, 2 points doesn't make a trend, but it's better than 1 point. At least we can draw a line. So I just wanted to have to do a lot of work on that because we had it from some other work that we had already done.
Perfect. Thank you. Alrighty. So with that, I don't know if I want to turn it over to Keith to introduce, or if I just turn it over straight to Kim or Nicole to introduce.
I guess I'll just introduce myself. My name's Keith Erfmeyer. I'm the assessor in Denver, Cindy's counterpart in Denver. Know Lori quite well as well. And I think it was Cindy suggested contacting me to find out what Denver does with this rental registry program that you're going to hear about. I immediately said I know nothing about this and turned it to Nicole. And I know Nicole and I have had interactions relative to Denver's data and corporate ownership and large ownership blocks of property. So we've shared data in a different number of ways, and I've been asked a number of times to analyze how many rental properties are in Denver versus how many home occupied properties are in Denver. So we've had these conversations as well. The issue largely is making lots of assumptions about data. And so anyway, it's been on our minds here in Denver for quite a while as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to talk much more effectively and educational wise about the rental program that has been going on in Denver now for a couple of years. So I'll turn it over to Nicole, and thank you so much Nicole for being willing to present this so that don't give misinformation. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, I was just clicking back and forth, making sure I could screen share before it was time. There's always that last minute pressure on the Zoom. So my name is Nicole Kim. I'm with Denver Excise and Licenses. I am the rental program manager. So as Keith mentioned, we are the agency that is responsible for operationalizing and implementing the license requirement. So I know you all are doing more work focused around ownership and things like that, but I was asked to just give kind of a background and some information about the requirements and lessons learned and things like that. So I'm going to share a presentation and then happy to answer questions at the end. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. Are you guys seeing my screen? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, so again, yeah, I'm with Department of Excise and Licenses, and sorry, of course I'm not. Oh, no, I'm going too far. Click happy. Okay, so first thing I want to get started with is the residential rental program policy goals and background. So this was a council initiated ordinance, meaning that city council initiated this ordinance. Council president at the time, Stacy Gilmore, was the main driving person related to this ordinance. She felt very strongly that this was necessary because there was nothing in the city that existed to proactively protect renters. And so this was voted on by council and passed in, I believe it was May of 2021. And then we began accepting license applications in March of 2022. So there was a phased implementation for the license program. Multi-units were required to obtain a license first. That was in 2023. And then as of January 1 of this year, single units, all units are required to have a license. So sorry, I said that a little bit backwards. As of January 1 of 2024 of this year, though, all rental units are required to have a license. So no more phasing, no more opting in or anything like that. And this covers any rental units that are 30 days or more at a time. I will talk just a little bit about short-term rentals. So again, we're responsible for issuing business licenses in the city and county of Denver. This is considered a business license. It follows kind of all of our other business license practices, and so that is how that came to us. The goals of the program, number one goal of the program is to ensure the minimum housing standards of the rental units for the welfare, safety, and health of those residing in them. So again, there was nothing that proactively existed in Denver to protect renters. There is a complaint-based program, and that is housed in Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. So the way that works is if a tenant has a complaint about a housing standard or a violation or something like that, they can make a complaint to Denver Public Health and Environment. They will go and investigate that complaint, and they'll work with the landlord to, make improvements. Obviously, there are some major, concerns with that as far as equity or, folks who might not want to make a complaint, people who don't know that that exists. There's some, fear of retaliation, all kinds of things like that. And that was what the major recognition was and the need for this program. So that's the basically number one goal. Another goal of this program is to track city housing stock and rentals. We track the number, the rental type, and then the locations of those. So again, no information like this existed. Obviously, we want information about housing to make good decisions about housing in Denver. And then lastly, we want to obtain and utilize that contact information for both landlords and tenants. This was something that was also very clear and evident, during the COVID pandemic when there was information that was available, but no way to get it to people because again, we don't have that database. So that is one of the goals that we're working towards building that out. There's also a requirement to provide a tenant rights and resources document that outlines some different, roles and responsibilities in situations that landlords and tenants might encounter and things like that. It also, gives some resources and information for both of those parties. And so there's a goal to strengthen that bond and that communication flow back and forth. That document is required to be provided by landlords to the tenants at the time of signing a lease and at the time that a rent demand is made. So like if you're, late on the rent and the demand is made, the license also requires that a written lease is provided to tenants. This is kind of all looped into that tenant rights and resources. So another, again, consideration for tenants where there might be, equity concerns, or there might be landlords who are doing things that are not appropriate, such as changing, changing the terms of the lease or things like that. So we want that written lease, tenant rights and resources document, all things that are kind of pieces of the license. What is a residential rental property? So a residential rental property is any building, structure, or accessory dwelling unit that is rented or offered for rent as residence for 30 days or more at a time. So this is going to be like someone is living there at least on a month-to-month basis. We do have that this is, it includes offered for rent properties. So once the property is being advertised for rent, a license is required. So whether it's actually occupied or not. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have our short-term rental license program. So that'll be our Airbnb and VRBO type of situations. And those are 29 days or less. So that's where we make that distinction. The goals of that program are completely different. And, some of the major requirements are different. Short-term rentals have to be your primary residence. So meaning you live there most of the time, that's your normal place of return. And then you rent it out, say, for example, on the weekends, or, for people coming to go to Broncos games or what have you like that. Residential rentals, that's where it's the long-term and someone lives there. Like I already mentioned, this program partners with and exists kind of on top of, the Denver Public Health and Environment complaint-based program for housing code violations. We work very, very closely with them. I did mention earlier this week when we met with Elizabeth that happy to connect you all with someone from DDPHE. I actually reached out to them and they weren't able to join us today. But they are the ones who manage all of those housing code violations. And they helped us make those determinations of what were the essential items that should be inspected for in order to determine that minimum housing standard compliance for the rental license. I'll touch on that in a minute. And like I already mentioned, we have to have the requirement for the written lease and the tenant rights and resources document. Here is some information about when a license is required. So any property owner who receives any type of a benefit from a tenant is considered renting. So they could be paying, traditional standard kind of rent every month. They could be paying just the HOA dues. They could be covering the property taxes or something like that. So there's no exemption for, I rent it to a family member and I charge them just really cheap rent or something like that. If you're receiving any type of a benefit or rent, license is required. Accessory dwelling units and basement apartments with a separate entrance, kitchen, and full bathroom are required to have a license. So the license is not required if it's a roommate type of situation. So like, let's say you have a 3-bedroom house and you live in one of the bedrooms and you have a roommate who lives in one of the bedrooms, and then you both kind of share that kitchen and you come and go through the same front door and things like that. A license isn't required in those situations, but in the others it is. And like I already mentioned, as of January 1 of this year, there's no more phasing in. A license is just required if you have that 30-day rental. And we have moved into enforcement now. So unlicensed units are subject to fines and enforcement. So we start with a notice of violation, and that's going to be a letter that just lets you know you're out of compliance with the license requirement. The way to correct that is to obtain the license. And then we move to a first, second, and third citation, and those carry fines of $150, $500, all the way up to $999. In the earlier years of the program, we definitely focused on outreach and education. This is a humongous program. It is the largest license expansion in Denver history. We anticipate that there could be potentially about 54,000 of these licenses. If some of those initial estimates that were done by City Council are correct. So we focused on education, knowing that, people didn't know about this. We're reaching a huge number of folks, a huge audience. But now we are definitely turning towards enforcement. If you haven't gotten the license yet, it's definitely time to do so. Like I mentioned before, so required inspections. This is how we're verifying that minimum, that compliance with minimum housing standards. So required inspections must be done by a third-party private inspector who meets the qualifications for the program. They have to be certified by a home inspection agency. There are 3 home inspection agencies that we accept. And then they also have to be a combination building inspector, and they have to be certified by the International Code Council. Home inspection agency certification is going to be kind of like existing construction, older homes maybe, and things like that. And then the ICC certification is for new construction, bringing things up to code compliance and stuff like that. So the thinking is they'll have that whole spectrum of knowledge. We do have a inspector registry list on our webpage that property owners can use as kind of a resource to find those inspectors who have certified to us that they meet those minimum standards, or I'm sorry, that they have those qualifications. Inspections are required for 10% of the total number of units. And those units have to be randomly selected by the inspector. So when someone has, a request for inspection, they're going to let the inspector know, I have X units and these are the addresses. The inspector is going to randomly select those. And it's 10% of the total of what you own and are applying for. So like, let's say you own 5 condos in a condo building, you're just going to have one of those 5 randomly selected by the inspector and inspected. Let's say if someone owns like a 300 apartment unit building, again, they're going to contact that inspector. The inspector is going to select 30 of those 300 and do the inspection on those. And then they'll document that on the inspection checklist. Costs and scheduling are completely separate from the city. So those are set by the inspectors, the inspection companies. We don't endorse any inspector or their services. Again, we just share that list kind of as a resource. If you have, like I already mentioned, a multi-unit property, you can have a single license for those multiple units as long as they're on one parcel or contiguous parcels, so meaning touching, and under one ownership. So this covers, like in some parts of Denver, like in Denver Tech Center area, you'll have kind of like a sprawling apartment complex where they'll have multiple buildings across, a few blocks or something like that. They can all be on one license. If you have a duplex, that could be on one license. If, for example, though, you have like 5 single family homes and they're scattered all across Denver, those would be single unit properties and they would require their own inspection and then their own license. And then all checklist items do apply regardless of the property or what type it is, or if it's a multi-unit or a single unit. And those include any common areas and shared utilities that might be applicable at that property. The inspection checklist form. So this is what, these are the inspection requirements. So you're going to use the inspection checklist form that was developed again with Denver Public Health and Environment. And it has 25 items, which are considered those minimum housing standards. So things like hot water, heat, egress, no broken stairways, things like that. You can get in and out and have those minimum housing standards. We do have an inspection checklist guidebook. Both of these are available on our webpage. So you and the property owner and the inspector should be working off of those same documents. The checklist has all of those violation items that they're marking as compliant or not compliant. And then the checklist guidebook provides additional information about each of those items and how you would determine if it's compliant or not compliant. If there's any questions about interpretation of those would go to Public Health and Environment for any like interpretation or additional information about that. Again, they kind of own that housing code. And then that's just a part of the license application requirement. Properties do also have to still comply with all existing codes and laws. So this doesn't get anybody out of like zoning or fire code compliance or anything like that. We do have some information about re-inspections and exemptions. There's also some time frame considerations to keep in mind with the license here. So once you have an inspection, your initial inspection, you do have to submit an application within 90 days of that. So we want those inspections to be fresh, very recent, like an accurate snapshot of what's going on at the property at that time. If there's a re-inspection requirement, so let's say you had violations and you're going to have that re-inspection, you can have that done within 1 year and submit that to us. So your application stays open for that 1 year. But that 90-day time frame is very important. Again, we want to have an accurate representation of what the property conditions are at that time. We do have some exemptions for affordable and public housing properties. They can apply for a fee and or inspection exemption. What they would do is use a local qualifying inspection. So meaning like if you're inspected by HUD or something like that, you can use that inspection in lieu of the third-party private inspection. And then new construction properties can use a certificate of occupancy. So to show that they are a brand new property, they just had basically all of the inspections done that would check for those similar things. They can use that in lieu of that third-party private inspection. And sorry, the new construction is within 4 years as well. Moving on to the application. So we do have our application online in our Denver Online Permitting and Licensing Center. This is where we issue vast majority of our licenses out of now. If you have any building permits in Denver, you would have an account set up there. Any licenses in Denver, you'd have an account set up there. So kind of one central hub. The application is 3 parts. And this is where I think there's some interest here for this group. So one of those sections is the entity registration, and that's going to be where we capture all of the ownership information. You can apply as yourself. So like if I have my condo that I have and I rent it out and it's just in my name, I would just apply as Nicole Kim. We have a residential rental, individual or couple type that you could use if that's the case. You could also apply as an LLC or a corporation or, you know, a nonprofit or something like that if that's your ownership structure. We do collect some information about the owner. So for example, like an ID, if you own it just in your name. If it's one of those LLCs or something like that, we're going to ask for an organizational document. So that could be like your articles of incorporation or your certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State website or something like that. Another section of the application is going to be the licensed establishment section. That's where we ask some information about the property. So address, how many units are there, things like that. Do you have any other addresses that are at that property? And then the actual residential rental property section. That's where we're going to ask about that inspection. When was the date? You'll provide the inspection checklist and the inspector certification copies as required documents for that section. We do also ask some information about utilities. So who pays the utilities? We ask some questions about the things that are in the rental unit. So, you know, do you have electricity or like gas for the appliances? We do not ask about the tenant. So we don't ask, you know, what's your tenant's name or how much rent do they pay or anything like that. We have a few other questions on the application, but that's the general gist of that. Application and license fees. So fees are due at the time of the application. There is an application fee. It's a one-time $50 fee, and that covers any application. So if you're doing a single unit license, you'd pay that application fee on each one of those. If it's a multi-unit, you know, you pay the application fee. And then you're also going to have the license fee that's due at the application and at renewals. This license is good for 4 years once it's issued. So when we say renewal, we mean 4 years from now. The license fee is based on the number of dwelling units, and it's a tiered structure you can see there. So $50 for a single unit, and then if you have 2 to 10, it's $100, and so on and so forth. One thing that I was asked to share was just a little bit of high-level kind of lessons learned, some of the things that we encountered rolling this out. Again, largest license expansion program in Denver history. Probably the number one key is to have very, very simple application requirements. We rolled out a slightly more complex version initially, and we very quickly learned that that was not going to work. So we rolled back a few things, simplified all of the documents that we had for this. We did multiple revisions with input, you know, to the checklist and things like that. If you read it and you think it makes sense to you, probably go back and make it a little bit more simple because it's going to, you know, read differently to somebody else or to another group. So that was definitely something that we've kept in mind and done some improvements on. Communication is absolutely key. It's been one challenging piece related to this license because, again, one of the main goals of this program is to get that contact information for owners and tenants. So we have been using all of the tools in our toolbox to try to do communication about this program. We have done, you know, online, we've done targeted ads, we've done radio, we've done, you know, local TV. We've obviously partnered with, you know, media whenever we can. We've done in-person sessions for, you know, helping folks with information and then also with their application support. We have used everything possible for applicants once they're in the process. We do, again, in-person support for application, you know, help and walkthroughs. We do virtual appointments for applications. We rolled that out with this program, and that has been very, very helpful, especially because sometimes owners of property in Denver don't live in Denver. So they might live in, you know, I don't know, Kentucky or Chicago or wherever. And so it helps for them to be able to connect with us virtually, and we can walk them through the application and whatever else we need there. We had a pretty substantial communication budget for this early on. We've rolled that back just slightly, but we are still focusing on communication for this program. Again, just knowing that it's such a humongous program and we're still trying to reach folks. And then also our partnerships. So we use a what we call in excise and licenses a coordinated management model. So very early on, we engaged partners who we work with on other programs to basically have all the, all the folks at the table to make sure that all of the requirements made sense, to make sure that we were capturing all of the things that we needed to, and to have that input from all of those essential, subject matter experts and partners to help us to roll this out. And then we kept them engaged, as we stabilized. We now, kind of bring that group together whenever we have an issue or we need to revisit something. So like right now, for example, we're looking at some of our enforcement pieces now that we're operationalizing that, making sure that everything makes sense. So just having those right people at the table and ready to engage, whenever you need them is absolutely key. Some quick updates here. So I know that there's an interest in some data. So we do capture, again, the total number of applications. Obviously here we are a little over 25,000 licenses issued at this point. We do ask for the number of units, so the exact number of units that you're applying for. And then we also ask you to select what unit category. So are you in that single unit or the 2 to 10 or 11 to 50 or what have you? That's how we calculate the fees on the license application. And then we also ask for that rental property type. So are you a single family detached home? Are you an apartment or a basement apartment? Or whatever that may be. And so that's the data that you see here. We also do ask for some information about if you have any ADA accessible rental units, if you have any income restricted units. And then as you can see there, the total for our licenses issued at this point covers a little over 177,000 total rental units in Denver at this point. This was from just a little bit earlier this week. Happy to share out more specific data with you all. And then I just provided my contact information here as well in case anybody needs that. We also do have a residential rental property information bulletin where we share out info about the license or kind of related programs when it makes sense. So if anybody's interested, I can share out this presentation and or the links to any of these things if you would like to sign up for those. And that is all that I have on the presentation here.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. What kind of questions do people have for Nicole on how they put this program together and what kind of information they're gathering? Any of that? Frankie?
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for the presentation. That was really interesting. I'm curious what issues you've run into since rolling the program out. Have you discovered significant violations? Do you feel confident that everyone who has a rental unit is now obtaining a license?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, so Denver Public Health and Environment is responsible for taking those violation complaints in and following up on those. At the beginning of the license rollout, I think that they were taking somewhere around 900 or 1,000 complaints, and we know that that number has gone up. We have definitely communicated out about that program in part, kind of networking with this one. And so we knew that those number of complaints were going to go up. We don't think that that means that there are more violations. It's just that more people are aware of the program and using that, as a resource to get, resolution or correction of those violations. But there is some, good data that I think Public Health and Environment has available and probably could share with all of you. Like I mentioned on, kind of some of those lessons learned and things that we've struggled with, again, those application requirements, it really needs to be very, very simple because again, we see this as a business license. Most owners of rental property did not initially see themselves as a business owner or needing a business license. And so that was a little bit of a communication piece, just kind of clarifying that it is for purposes of licensing. And so that's why you have to follow this process. And again, just connecting with those folks, we're still working towards that. We are working off of initial city council estimates where there's potentially 50,000 licenses that could come in. We are at about 25,000 now. So we think we're maybe halfway towards that. We are in 2025 going to look into getting perhaps like an outside firm or something like that to do a revised estimate of that number. So are we actually closer? We think possibly. So we hope to have a better revision of that, but we're at 25,000 licenses issued now. So we actually feel very, very good about where we're at. And again, we'll still keep on taking those license applications. We do receive, I think, still on our slower months, the last few months, we've still received like 300 applications a month. So it's not like it's down to an absolute trickle, but it's definitely slowed down. And then we'll be doing those enforcement efforts to make sure that if you haven't gotten the license, we will be notifying that you need to.
Okay, and I'm sorry if you covered this in your presentation, I missed it, but what is the money being used for, the fees collected?
So the fees collected just covers the license, operational program. So the fees are intentionally very, very low. We didn't want there to be, City Council and Councilwoman Gilmore did not want the fees to be a hindrance to obtaining the license. So if you have a single unit property, you're going to pay a $50 application fee and then a $50 license fee. So it's $100, and that covers 4 years. So if you break that down, it's $25 a year. So very, very, very minimal fees.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining us and sharing about the program. I have a few questions. I'll start with data related stuff though. So wondering if and where all the information about registered landlords and the status of their properties when it comes to licensing is available publicly. Like, is there a dashboard? Is this publicly accessible information? And if so, where is it? And then for purposes of this group, trying to think about corporate ownership and how these rental properties are owned and by whom. Do you feel that the information that Denver and this program collects enables any discernment between corporate owners versus, someone who owns one single property or might be renting out any of you? Thanks.
Yeah. So on the first piece, actually, I'm going to answer the second one first, because that's a little bit easier. So like I mentioned, we do collect the ownership information as a part of the entity registration. So they're going to give us the entity name, and that's the true owner of the property. So again, if I was applying for, like, let's say my house, I would apply as a residential, rental, individual, or couple, and I would use my name, and then I would give my ID as my entity registration. And so we have that data. If, for example, I owned my house under like an LLC, I'd apply as that LLC and as an LLC entity type. And you can definitely, take a look at that data. I've actually pulled it for this group if you guys want some of that. So it'll capture the entity name, the entity type, and then you could obviously do some cross-referencing to see, how many of each are there, or, matching those names or what have you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. And then as far as the availability of the data and the information. So on the application, we do ask for a publicly available contact, or a contact that's going to be shared publicly. You have to provide an email and a phone number, and that's same across the board for all of our license types. You can also download in our open data catalog a list of all the licenses and who those are issued to, and the address of those licenses. Again, that's the same across all of our license programs. So you could do the same thing for like liquor or security guards or marijuana. So this is another, data type that is available in that open data catalog that's on our website. And then we also do have on our main webpage for this program, we have a smaller version of that data snapshot that I showed, which shows like how many licenses are issued right now, how many are pending, and then a little bit about the types. So like single unit, multi-unit. We do get some data requests for this program. And then of course we're subject to CORA. So that would all be, open records if it was requested.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for pulling what you have.
Yeah, and I think I'll follow up with Elizabeth on getting that over to you all, or what specifically you all would like.
Awesome. Teo?
Just a quick question, Nicole, off the top of your head, if you know it, and if not, we can circle back later. What percentage of what we would refer to as mom and pop owners, meaning just picture an individual who owns 1 or 2 or 3 properties, what percentage of those hold them in their name versus hold them in LLCs? Again, if you have a ballpark, I'll be glad to hear it. If you want to circle back, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't have that off the top of my head, but like I said, we're happy to share that data, and you guys can do any of that, manipulating and calculations that you want to do. As far as single unit versus multi-unit, so of the 25,308 licenses that are issued or that we've received today, single unit or single dwellings are 19,178 of those. So there's way more single units. But again, that could be a single unit in a condo that a person owns or an LLC owns. To do that breakdown would take a little bit more.
Thank you.
And thanks, Keith. I saw that you popped some of that information in there as well in the chat. Sorry.
Any other questions? I guess just one quick question for me. How much time did it take to go from legislation to stand up?
So, like I mentioned, the ordinance was passed it was signed in May of 2021. If I had to guess, I'd want to say there was at least, I want to say like 2 or so years of, kind of work done prior to that. If you go on our webpage, or I can drop the link in the chat, there's actually still an existing webpage from when Councilwoman Gilmore did her initial, kind of efforts. It was called Healthy Rentals for All. And so I think there was probably about 2 years of initial efforts there. Then it was passed. The ordinance was passed in May of 2021, and we began accepting applications in March of 2022. So a little bit less than a year of time that we kind of got the ordinance handed over to us, and we stood it up to have an application available.
And how many staff run the program?
So we actually have recently had a change to the program where we kind of rolled the application processing back into our main application processing pool. So for a little while, we had a dedicated team of techs to process those applications, and it was 2 licensed technicians, myself as the program manager, and then I report up to the finance and program administration director. And so we have staff that does communications. We have our policy team, we have our data team, we have our enforcement team. But as far as dedicated just specifically to the program, I would say it was myself, the program manager, and 2 technicians. We've now rolled that back into, again, that main kind of pool of applications. So one of our licensed techs could be doing, a liquor application, and then a marijuana application, and then a residential rental, and then a security guard, and what have you. During the time when we had a huge burst of applications, which was at the end of last year, we did move some folks over to help with that application processing. We kind of knew there was going to be a big surge of applications as people realized, oh gosh, I have to get in right before the deadline. So at that time, I think we took about 3 or 4 other folks to help with that processing to get through that backlog. But I would say that was kind of the core staff. We do have our rental enforcement team, which when they're fully staffed, it's 3 inspectors plus a lead. And those are the inspectors that do the enforcement. So they're going to be the ones issuing that notice of violation and then those citations if you do not have a license. Again, Denver Public Health and Environment does the enforcement on those actual housing code violations.
And I'm just curious, how are you finding people? I mean, it's easy to find an apartment building and saying, okay, that is on our list. But what about all of these like single family rentals? How do you find these violators?
Right. So we have a couple of things, and I should have touched on this. So we do have a complaint form. So we have shared that out. We definitely publicize that to say, if you know of an unlicensed rental, let us know. We've been getting some great information there. People are definitely letting us know about unlicensed rentals. We also use information from Keith and his team from the assessors for that property tax information, who owns properties. Our number 1 priority list at the beginning of 2023 was properties that had public health and environment violations, though. So that was where we kind of looked to first. We now live in the same system. So our licenses are issued out of the same system as public health does their violations in. So it's been very easy to share information. So we worked off of that as a priority list. And then lastly, we also do have software that we use that scrubs basically rental listing websites. So we use it for our short-term rental program. When you have a rental property, short-term rental or the residential rentals, a license number is required in any advertisements. And so if you don't have a license number, we'll see it. We use this a little bit differently in our short-term rental program, where we partner with those listing platforms to make sure that they don't post any listings. Say, for example, for like a 2-night, VRBO rental, they can't post it without a license number. We're kind of doing a similar model with this license.
Cool. All right, any other questions for Nicole or Keith? I want to thank you guys so much. This was great information. I think exactly what people were looking for. Don't be surprised if you guys get hit up again with just some other questions. But thank you guys very much. You're more than welcome to stay on if you want, but feel free to drop if you want. We're just going to be doing technical things like date of next meeting.
Well, thank you for having me. I will drop off, but I'm happy to share the presentation copy, and then I'll follow up with you, Elizabeth, on getting some of that other data over to you and any follow-up requests.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Likewise, I'll drop off. Good luck to you guys.
Thanks. All right. So next question really for the task force is December meeting. The last Wednesday are like holiday days. So if we were to move it to the 18th, that would be kind of like the last Wednesday that's not a holiday-ish day. And want to know, do you guys want to meet, or would just a round robin of emails work better for people?
I think it would be important to get an update on what data have been received for the project. And that could probably be accomplished by email, but perhaps if there's a decision to be made based on how that goes, we could have a short meeting as well.
Anyone else with thoughts? Lori, were you thinking the same thing?
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, I hate to put a meeting on our calendars if we don't have an update, but trying to fit a meeting into everybody's calendar later is more difficult, I think. So
Good
I would
point.
rather have the meeting scheduled and put it on my calendar and cancel it than to not. Personally.
Yeah, no, but I think that makes sense. Any other comments on that? Otherwise, we'll kind of stick with that plan of hold your calendar for the 18th, and then you'll either have the meeting or not. All right. Now it's just any time for comments from you guys. Any other comments from the task force? Anything? Certainly. Oh, I guess we didn't really talk about, we're working on the scope of work. So that's the update on that piece. Still determining what is needed. So working on that, and probably we'll have something in December to share in terms of tasks maybe of that scope of work. Teo?
I just had a couple quick hitter items, if that's okay to
Yep.
jump in. So first and foremost, not directly related or just tangentially related, I want to congratulate Kate and Elizabeth for an exhilarating demography summit 2024. That was very, very cool. Appreciate you guys sharing all that information relevant here with regard to home ownership and of course renters. So thank you for that. Kate, congratulations on stepping in, and Elizabeth, thank you for your service, because we're in the waning days of an era. 4 more days. Want to thank you for just for everything you've done over the years for Colorado and all that. So just thank you for that. I have a technical note for the group, but I want to make sure everyone knew that. I want to thank Adam that you reopened the survey portal, and I want to draw everyone's attention to a paper that that was just recently published, and I do want to sincerely implore everyone to take a read. This is Joshua Coven from NYU's Stern School of Business. The paper's title, which for those who haven't seen it or heard about it, it's the impact of institutional investors on homeownership and neighborhood access. So again, Adam, I just uploaded it, so I'm sure at some point when you get to it, you can put it in. But I think everyone on this task force should take a read on that paper, because it addresses some of the things we've been hearing from a lot of speakers that have come through, some of the unintuitive elements that are part of this conversation. Specifically, one of the bigger things that the paper looks at is the increase in rental supply, and the fact that, what the findings of the paper are, that institutional investors' entry into markets increases neighborhood access specifically for lower income renters. The paper measures where renters come from as they move into neighborhoods where there's single family home rental providers, and that neighborhood access is a real thing. And I think it's very, very important as we think about recommendations and we think about policies that we be very, very cognizant of the whole picture that's going on. Another thing I just threw out there, again, I hope you guys read the paper, because it's almost written for this task force. It wasn't, and if we can get Joshua to come join us, I think that'd be great. But it almost seems like it was written kind of for this group. But one of the things I really want to call everyone's attention to, because it wasn't on my radar, to be honest, was that there was kind of a thought or an assumption that when any investor, institutional or otherwise, comes in and buys a single family rental home, the idea is that that's one less home that's available for home ownership. Very interestingly, in this paper, they find that intuitive conclusion is actually ultimately incorrect. And specifically what they note is that every time an investor comes along and buys, or institutional investor comes and buys a single family home, the amount of available homeowner occupant homes goes down by about 0.23 homes. Which is weird, so it's less than 1 for 1. What they observe is that there's a feedback loop that happens with regard to construction of new homes, and that there's a signal to the market that there's more need for homes, and so there's a feedback loop there. And it's also worth noting that smaller landlords will often then sell, so that those are some impacts. And again, it's just worth noting that there's some unintuitive things we should be thinking about that should be, maybe aren't part of the regular narrative, but should certainly be part of our analysis as we're thinking again about our research question and certainly any policy suggestions that we would have. So Joshua Coven, it's going to be on the website, I'm sure, at some point soon. If not, it's on the internet all over. The impact of institutional investors on homeownership and neighborhood access. Worth your time, I certainly think.
Super. Thank you, Teo. Kinsey?
My comment was just back to yours, Elizabeth, about how there should be updated scope of work for the next consultant. I would just love to discuss that or see what you all have come up with over email in December as well. Thanks.
Super. Anything else from the task force to bring up as topics? Also, make sure that you're sending ideas. Like if you want to hear about X, the only way we know about it is if you tell us. So make sure that we're aware of any other topics you want to hear about. Anything else? All right, Adam, do you want to see if there's anyone on for public comment? And while he's doing that, I want to first thank you, Teo, for your comments. I'm actually going to miss work a little bit. But we're really fortunate to have Kate with us. She's going to do a great job taking over in this role, has a great deal of research experience. So I think that she also brings that to the table as well as just a very amazingly solid economist, and will do a great job as state demographer, but also moving this project along as well.
Elizabeth, you're welcome to pop into our meetings and continue with us if you would like. And, I just want to make sure you know that you don't have, you can come on as a panelist. You don't have to come on just as a,
Well, hey, thank you so much.
We will miss you in your leadership for sure.
I'll keep that in the back of my mind. See if I want to just show up to see what you guys are up to. Actually, I'm going to hit Kenzie's comment. If anything yet, Adam?
No, not yet. So
Okay.
if you want to make a comment, please just ping me in the Q&A and we'll get you talking.
So I will hit up the consultants in this group. You know, as we're developing the scope of work for kind of this, it's really going to be a facilitator report writer, kind of taking all of the information that we've done, plus the results of the research, plus public comment, feedback. If anybody's got an example scope that they'd like to share, or any recommendations on consultants, that would be great, because once we get it posted, we can also ping it. We typically will post it on BidNet, but then we'll also ping folks. So, you know, the Heidi and Kinsey, anybody else doing consulting work that want to share information, please do that. Also, when I sent out the email earlier, I guess it was yesterday, you saw Kate's email on there. So now she and Adam are your primary contacts. So make sure that you use them for any questions or comments. Thank you, Frankie. And that, Adam, anything?
Nope, it doesn't look like it.
Perfect. Oh, and great. Thank you very much, Heidi. That would be super. All right. Well, I want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday time. It's getting at that time of year. I love Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is probably my most favorite. It's just really about food, friends, and family, right? So everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, safe travels if you're traveling. Thank you, all of you, for your work over this last year with the task force. I found it just incredibly, I don't want to say refreshing, because I don't think I've ever met bad people, but just amazing how thoughtful all of you guys are, and really appreciated all of the different thoughts that people have brought to the table and lenses to, you know, from their area of work. So totally appreciate how thoughtful all of you guys have been. It's been an absolute pleasure managing this task force. So I want to thank you guys for all of that. And so with that, we'll talk to you guys, maybe me, but you guys will talk later.
We will see you around, Elizabeth. Thank you
All
for
right.
everything
Elizabeth.
you've done for us.
Take care. Bye-bye.